Hi, I'm Isleen. My parents said I was just an extra mouth to feed. They didn't scream. They didn't fight. They just left an envelope with $200 and locked the door behind me. But the part that still haunts me? They erased me so quietly, so politely, that even I started to believe I never belonged. They cut me out of photos, out of conversations, out of the family's finances like I was never meant to exist. So, what happens when the daughter they erased comes back and buys the roof over their heads? You ever wonder how far someone will go when they're pushed out of their own story? It didn't start with a slap or a scream. It wasn't dramatic, not the kind of scene that leaves dishes shattered or voices hoarse. It was just dinner, the kind where everyone sat in their usual spot, like always. The dining room lights buzzed faintly overhead, and the smell of overcooked meatloaf clung to the air like a memory that wouldn't let go. Mom had forgotten the salt again, or maybe she hadn't forgotten. Maybe she just didn't care anymore. Her attention was fixed on her iPad, flipping through the slides for her next real estate seminar while pretending to be present. Dad, as usual, turned on the post-game talk radio the second he walked in. He liked the noise, said it filled the silence, but it wasn't just silence he was covering up. It was the quiet failure of a family that hadn't spoken honestly in years. Callista sat to my right, her laptop open even at the dinner table. She barely glanced up. Her fingers tapped rhythmically, always answering, always somewhere else. She wore that half-smile she reserved for people beneath her notice me, included. Across from me was a man I didn't recognize. Dad had mumbled something about him being a former coworker or a friend from his golf league. No introduction, no hello. Just another guest I wasn't supposed to interrupt. I sat there with my fork, lifting food to my mouth out of habit more than hunger. My plate was chipped, same one I'd had since high school. Nobody had bothered to replace it. I guess it suited me. A little cracked, but still expected to hold it together. Mom poured iced tea and laughed at one of her own comments, then looked around the table like a performer waiting for applause. Then she said it. Well, it's not easy feeding 4 mouths when only 3 bring something to the table. The air left the room. The words were quiet, surgical, and somehow more lethal than any yell could have been. They cut through the radio chatter, through the clink of silverware. Even the guest paused mid-chew. Callista didn't even blink. Dad? He sipped his tea like nothing had been said, like I hadn't just been erased in real time. I looked down at my plate. I didn't say a word. I just kept chewing, because that was the only power I had left in that moment, not to cry, not to flinch, just to finish the bite. Later that evening, after the guest had left, and the kitchen was filled with the soft hum of the dishwasher, Dad called me into the living room. The lights were dimmed low, the way he liked them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. That almost made it worse. He handed me a folder with a few pages inside. One of them was a removal form for the family health insurance plan. We're adjusting a few things, he said casually. You're almost 30. It's time to start managing your own coverage. No discussion, no, are you okay? Or, do you need help getting started? Just a signature line and a dried-out pen. I looked down at the paper. My name was printed near the bottom in faded ink, as though someone had cued it for deletion weeks ago and just forgot to hit confirm. And still, I signed. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know where else to go. What choice did I have? I walked back to my room and laid the form on my desk, staring at it under the weak glow of my old desk lamp. Some foolish part of me thought maybe, just maybe, it would transform into something else. An apology, a letter of explanation, a hidden message saying, "We see you, we love you." We just didn't know how to say it. But it was exactly what it looked like, a final stroke in the quiet erasure of my place in this house. I sat down on the edge of my bed. Everything around me looked the same, walls still covered with old posters, a drawer still stuck from the time I spilled nail polish inside it. But something inside me shifted. Not a breakdown, not a scream, just a recognition. A cold, clean truth finally taking shape in the pit of my stomach. They were phasing me out. Not loudly, not violently, but slowly, strategically, the way you backspace a sentence you regret writing, one letter at a time, until nothing's left. I leaned forward, elbows on knees, and for the first time in years, I let myself remember. Graduation day, high school. I was standing in a too-long gown with sweaty palms, waiting to hear my name. I'd looked for Mom in the front row, thought I saw her head at first, but it was just a stranger. Later, she told me she had a migraine, but she'd been there for Callistus, cried the whole time, hugged her with both arms. When it was my turn, I walked across that stage alone. No camera flash, no cheer. I had told myself then that it was bad luck, that maybe next time it would be different. But deep down, I think I knew. And now I was certain. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling until the light fixture blurred. Then, I whispered it out loud, not to them, but to myself. Just to make it real. They want me gone. And this time, I heard it clearly. And 2 weeks later, they made sure I was. After that dinner, everything in the house shifted, but no one said a word. Mom stopped asking if I wanted anything from the store. Dad quit updating me about which bill had been paid. Callista barely looked up when I walked into a room. The silence stretched so wide, I could almost hear my own presence. I kept to my corner, folded my laundry a little too perfectly, washed the dishes before anyone asked. I figured if I stayed useful, I'd be tolerated. I even packed a small bag, kept it in the closet behind the boxes labeled Christmas. Not out of paranoia, just instinct. Then Friday came. I had gone for a short walk around the neighborhood, more to clear my head than to go anywhere. The air was heavy, the kind of humid that makes everything feel like it's sagging. When I stepped back inside, the first thing I noticed was how still the house was. No radio, no typing, no clanking of dishes. Just silence. There was an envelope on the kitchen counter. Plain, no name. I opened it with the kind of careful dread you reserve for test results and breakups. Inside were 2 folded bills, $100 bills, and a short note in Dad's handwriting. "We think it's time. You'll land on your feet. You're smart." That was it. No, "we love you." No, "let us help." Just a clear, clean nudge out the door, like I was a fledgling that overstayed the nest. I didn't storm upstairs. I didn't demand answers. I walked back to my room and opened the closet, took out the small duffel, added a toothbrush, my charger, and a change of clothes. I left the framed diploma on the nightstand. It had always looked out of place here. When I stepped out, no one stopped me. The front door closed behind me, like a period at the end of a sentence no one wanted to write. I spent the first night at a diner, nursing a cup of coffee until sunrise. The second night, I found a bench under an old billboard that still advertised phone books. On the third, it rained. Not a gentle drizzle, real Texas rain, loud and merciless. I stood at the front steps, soaked through, and holding my bag like a life preserver. I knocked. Once, twice, a third time. The porch light flickered on, and through the sheer curtain, I saw her. Mom. She looked right at me, and then she pulled the curtain shut. She didn't need to say a word. I stood there long enough to feel the cold settle in my bones. Then I turned, walked back down the steps, and didn't look back. I ended up at a roadside motel near the edge of town, one of those places with neon lights that never quite work and a vending machine that eats your quarters half the time. I paid for a room with the cash Dad left me $200 to buy my silence and send me on my way. The room smelled of mildew and disappointment. The sheets were thin, the walls thinner. A family argued next door, voices rising and falling like background music to my thoughts. I lay on the bed, scrolling through my phone, no new messages. No missed calls. No one was wondering where I was. That night, something broke free inside me. Not a scream or a sob, just a quiet fracture. A small shift in how I saw everything, including myself. They didn't slam the door shut. They just locked it. And I had been waiting on the wrong porch. If this is what it feels like to be erased, I whispered to the empty room, then maybe I needed to vanish before I could be seen. I didn't expect my second chance to come from a coat I gave away 15 years ago. By the third night in that motel, I'd stopped pretending to care how I looked. The mirror told the truth-sunken cheeks, salt-streaked hair, eyes that didn't flinch anymore. I hadn't eaten since a vending machine lunch 2 days back, and even that was mostly stale pretzels and soda syrup. My fingers hovered over my phone. There were only a few contacts left, most of them distant, digital, or dead. But one name sat near the bottom of the list, like a footnote I'd never deleted. Thane Morales. We hadn't spoken since high school. Back in 8th grade, he was that quiet kid who got shoved into lockers and stuttered when he read aloud. The only thing I remembered more clearly than his nervous voice was the day I handed him my jacket in the middle of a downpour. He'd forgotten his, and taken mine off without thinking. That was just who I used to be. At 2:14 a.m., I hit call. When I arrived at his apartment, a one-bedroom above an old bakery near downtown, I hesitated at the door. He opened it on the second knock. He looked older, of course he did, but his eyes hadn't changed. Still soft, still cautious. He took one look at me, wet, exhausted, bag slung over my shoulder, and didn't ask anything. Just nodded and stepped aside. He handed me a hoodie as I walked in. It was faded blue, worn thin at the elbows. "You gave me yours back in middle school," he said. "That year, I had nothing. So I guess it's my turn." I didn't cry. I just nodded and held the fabric close, the same way you might hold a memory you're not sure is real. Thane pointed toward the couch. "It folds out if you want, or just crash as is." For the first time since I left my parents' house, I felt human. Not invisible, not extra, just seen. The days that followed were quiet in the best way. Thane lived simply, no clutter, no noise. He worked remote doing freelance tech support, fixed things around the building for a rent discount, brewed strong coffee, and never pried. One afternoon, I noticed him frustrated over a spreadsheet for billing. I offered to help. He laughed at first, but when I cleaned up the formulas, added logic, and made the dashboard intuitive, he stared at me like it turned water into wine. "You ever think about doing this again?" he asked. I didn't answer. Not out loud. That evening, while he cooked rice and eggs, we sat at the table, plates half full, silence stretching comfortably between us. "You know," he said, "when I was a kid, I thought disappearing would hurt less than being ignored." I looked at him and whispered, "Maybe it does. But it's still disappearing." He nodded slowly, then added, "You're not erased. You just got wiped clean enough to rewrite." That sentence didn't hit like a punch. It was softer, like a door creaking open after years of rust. When he went to bed, I pulled my ancient laptop from my bag. It took 10 minutes just to boot up, but the screen still glowed, barely, like it remembered who I used to be. I opened tabs, checked email, applied for 3 gigs writing, formatting, transcription. Nothing fancy, just the basics, something, anything. Then I clicked on a link for foreclosed property auctions. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I was tired of being at someone else's mercy. Maybe because if I ever got a foothold, I needed a place to stand. Scrolling through the listings, most were too far, too big, too broken, until one address stopped me cold. I stared at it, blinking hard. It was theirs, the building my parents lived in, the one I grew up seeing as solid, permanent, unshakable, now listed. Auction scheduled in 3 weeks. Starting bid, reasonable. Status, distressed. I stared at the screen for a long time, hands still, heart suddenly loud. That's their building. I didn't wake up plotting revenge. I didn't sharpen knives in the dark or dream up grand speeches. I just wanted answers. A thread of truth to pull from the tangled web my family had wrapped around me. But sometimes, life hands you a match when you're already standing in gasoline. It was a gray Thursday afternoon, the kind where even the sky seemed unsure of itself. I sat curled up on a corner cushion in Thane's apartment, my knees pulled to my chest, the soft hum of his old coffee maker the only sound grounding me to the moment. The smell of overbrewed espresso lingered in the air as I stared at the flickering screen of my dying laptop. The power cord wobbled in the port, threatening to give out, but that stubborn machine held on, like it still had something left to say. And it did. The auction site blinked back at mean old listing Id, found at midnight the night before. I had clicked out of curiosity. I stayed because of disbelief. There it was. A familiar address. 112 East Sable Street. A 6-unit building. A place I'd known my whole life. Our old family property. Listed as distressed. But that wasn't the punch. The real blow came from the name sitting under current ownership. Velcor Realty. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. A fluke. Just another faceless company scooping up leftovers from the housing crisis. But the name, it scratched at something in me, like a forgotten melody. Velcor. I opened a new browser tab. My fingers moved before my brain could catch up. Property tax portals, business registration records, digital receipts. I was on autopilot, chasing a shadow. It didn't take long. Velcor was a shell company. Its P.O. box? The same one Mom used during her cupcake empire phase, right after Callista left for college. I remember helping her design labels for the boxes. The business died in 6 weeks, but apparently she kept the LLC alive just in case. And now, apparently, just in case included mortgaging the only real asset our family had left. There it was, in black and white. Valora C. Harmon, registered agent, my mother. And then I found the mortgage documents, signed by her, in full. Same loopy V I used to copy when forging her name for school permission slips. My stomach dropped when I saw the payment history. Missed deadlines, stacked up penalties, red-lettered notices from the bank. Then the kicker, a formal default, dated just 2 weeks ago. The building wasn't just up for auction, it was teetering on the edge of being swallowed whole. I leaned back, breath catching like something was stuck in my chest. It wasn't sadness, not grief. It was something heavier, like a betrayal so layered it had no name. Valora had mortgaged the property, behind everyone's back. No family meeting, no signature from Dad. Not even a whisper to me. All those years she preached about stability, about me being irresponsible, ungrateful, unstable. Meanwhile, she was using a dead cupcake dream to quietly gamble away the roof over our heads. And Dorian, my father. He hadn't said a word. Instead of speaking up, he gave me an envelope and let me go. I thought it was cruelty. Now, I wondered if it was shame. Thane re-entered the room just as I was blinking away whatever storm was brewing behind my eyes. "You okay?" he asked gently. I closed the laptop with a click that sounded louder than it should have. "Define okay," I said flatly. He didn't push, just slid a mug across the table toward me like it was a lifeline. "Want sugar?" "No," I muttered, still staring into the void. "I want a lawyer." That got his attention. He didn't ask questions, just nodded once, and by that evening, we were seated across from one of his old college friends, real estate attorney who specialized in small LLCs and foreclosure flips. The kind of guy who didn't care about your past, just your paperwork. He slid over a stack of forms. "You want to form an investment entity?" he asked. "You just need to name it and sign." Name it. I could have called it Payback Partners. I could have called it Don't Bet Against Me, Inc. I could have made it loud, bitter, scathing. Instead, I paused, then wrote 3 letters. ISL Holdings. My name, my initials. Something simple, something mine. And for the first time in a long time, I felt ownership not just of the company, but of myself. I signed, submitted, and bookmarked the auction date. 17 days. That was the countdown. But make no mistake, this wasn't about saving them. I wasn't coming in like some estranged daughter-turned-hero. This wasn't a rescue mission. It was a reclamation. They'd pushed me out, erased me from their story, handed my seat at the table to someone else, and smiled while doing it. Fine. Let them toast to my absence. But they never stopped to ask what it'd take with me when I left. And they were about to find out. They thought they erased me. But I was already building my return. The LLC paperwork came through a few days later. I walked to the local legal aid office tucked between a payday loan store and a dusty insurance agency. It wasn't fancy, but the man behind the desk had kind eyes and didn't ask unnecessary questions. He helped me finalize the forms. When it came time to sign, I slowed down. Not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to feel each letter take shape easily. My name. Mine, not borrowed, not cropped out, not whispered through someone else's mouth. The ink soaked into the page like I was carving myself back into existence. Later that night, I opened my old hard drive. It had survived 3 moves, 1 hard drop, and a thunderstorm. I was hunting for financial records I could use for freelance applications. What I found instead made me stop breathing. It was a Word document titled Statement to Use C. I clicked it, already knowing what it was. Back in my early 20s, Callista had asked for help with an MBA scholarship essay, said she needed a little polish. I'd written it for her from scratch 3 hours straight, heart and all. It was personal, about carrying a family through struggle, about being the silent foundation. I highlighted a line I remembered writing. Some daughters are born to shine. Others are built to carry weight in silence. Then I Googled it. There it was. On Callista's blog, front and center, how I became my family's backbone. She hadn't changed a word. That was mine. Not just the phrasing, the experience. She took the words I bled into for her future and pasted her name over them like a signature on a stolen painting. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stared at the screen for a long time, the kind of stare that strips the color out of things. I'd thought we had a bond back then, that maybe she saw me, even if Mom and Dad didn't. Turns out she saw me the way some people see good wallpaper decorative, useful, forgettable. The next morning, I walked a slow loop around the block near the motel. Stores with names etched on glass, people who claimed their little corner of the world. I hadn't done that. It moved through life like a draft through an open window, present, but never asked to stay. That afternoon, I attended a public zoning meeting at City Hall. I was there to understand more about foreclosure auctions, how notices went out, how bids were recorded. I sat in the back, unnoticed. Until I wasn't. A man 2 rows over leaned toward me after the meeting ended. Late 60s, plaid shirt, clean-shaven but tired around the eyes. You're Valoris girl, aren't you? I froze. Thought so. You've got her edge, he said, voice low but firm, but none of her ice. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. He offered a small smile. If you're here for the Sable Street building, good. That place needs new blood. Been rotten under the surface too long. I didn't explain myself, didn't offer a backstory or context, just nodded. It was the first time in weeks someone connected me to my family, without praise or pity, just truth. Walking back to Thane's apartment, I kept thinking about that. The way people outside your story can still see the real chapters. He saw something, not my wounds, but my shape. That night, I opened a blank Word document, titled it ISL Holdings Purpose Statement, and I began to write. Not for them. For me. They used my words. Now I use my voice. They spent years pushing me out, pretending I wasn't part of anything they built, anything they shared. But the thing about being invisible for so long, you learn how to move quietly, strategically, and when it was finally my turn to act, I didn't need noise. I needed results. The auction wasn't cinematic, no gavel, no frantic bidding war. Just a login screen, a coffee cup, and my laptop on a Tuesday morning. A few mild offers came in barely serious. Then, ISL Holdings submitted the final bid. Strong. Unshakable. The moment I saw the words, "You won," pop up in bold on the screen, I didn't grin. I didn't clap or text anyone. I simply whispered to the air of my quiet kitchen, I don't need applause. I just need the deed. By noon, I had already drafted the new notices, rent adjustments, maintenance expectations, late fee schedules, all within regulation, all enforceable. The documents were cold, fair, and effective. No emotional language, just numbers. But for Unit 4B, Valora and Dorian's apartment, the rent would rise by 213%. That number wasn't random. It came from spreadsheets, repair logs, missed payments, and a history of entitled comfort subsidized by family loyalty. Loyalty that apparently had a one-way expiration. Some might call it revenge. I call it balance. The property manager I hired was sharp and discreet. She had no idea I had lived in that building as a child, had memories in its stairwell, or had once fixed the porch light myself when Dad didn't have the time. She only knew that ISL Holdings paid its invoices on time, filed its documents early, and followed every city code to the letter. That's how I wanted it. No drama, just business. The first tremor arrived via text Callista, of course, stirring the pot in the old family group chat like we were still pretending to be whole. Who jacked the rent this high? Valora's freaking out. What even is this? Seconds later, Valora chimed in. This new landlord is a monster. No warning, no notice. Typical, no soul. Dorian stayed silent. So did I. Later that day, I tried logging into our old family Dropbox where Mom used to store scanned W-2s, birth certificates, insurance docs. It gave me a clean rejection. Access denied. I checked the logs. My email had been removed. No alert. No message. I wasn't just being cut off. I was being erased. Out of caution, I called the bank where Dad opened a joint savings account in my name when I was 14. I'd left it untouched for years, out of respect. It was closed 6 weeks ago, the rep told me. No letter, no courtesy call. Just gone. I hung up, sat in silence, let the fact sink in, not just that they had shut doors, but that they were redoing the blueprints to a house that no longer included me. But this time, I didn't collapse. Instead, I double-checked the tenant list, reviewed the upcoming repair timelines, noticed that the heating ducts in Unit 2C were overdue for cleaning. I sent a note to the maintenance team. Then I opened my inbox and signed off on the insurance renewal for the building. I didn't cry. I clicked. They could pretend I didn't exist. I could prove I did through deeds, through signatures, through paper trails and tax filings. They had one narrative. I had the receipts. 3 days later, a message landed in the tenant portal. The subject line was blunt. Appeal. Rent increase urgent. It read, "We've lived here for over a decade, never missed a payment. This is unfair, excessive, and honestly cruel. Who does this to people they know?" It was signed by Valora. I stared at it. No guilt, no rush of satisfaction either. Just a steady understanding. This was the price of rewriting someone else's story. I forwarded the email to the manager with one note. Respond per lease clause C. No exceptions. I didn't owe them an explanation. I had already spoken through contracts, through structure, through silence. That night, I drove by the property. Just once. I didn't stop. Just circled the block and looked. The porch light was still flickering. It used to be mine to fix. I remember being 13, climbing up on a chair with a new bulb in hand, just trying to be helpful, hoping someone would notice. No one ever did. Now, the porch light still blinked, but on my property. Under my name. Paid for by someone they said wasn't worthy of having anything. They built walls to shut me out. I turned them into doors. And walked right through. But when you open a door they thought was locked, they don't just panic, they attack. I woke up to 5 text messages. 2 from former classmates. 1 from an old family friend. The last 2 from people I hadn't heard from in years. "Hey, you okay? What's going on with your mom's post?" I clicked open Facebook not because I cared what Valora posted, but because I already knew it would be about me. There it was. A sepia-toned family photo from a summer picnic years ago. The caption read, "Some children choose greed over blood. Some betray their own. We gave everything. They gave us paperwork. I was in the photo. Or I had been. Now my face had been cropped just enough that only the curve of my elbow made it in. The illusion of family, staged perfectly. The comments were full of sympathy, Bible verses, the usual Midwestern pity parade. A few cousins chimed in. "So sorry, Aunt Valora. You did everything you could. One even asked if it joined a cult." Callista messaged me directly. "What did you do?" I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth didn't belong in a thread full of hand-clapping emojis and self-righteous grief. I took a screenshot, then blocked Valora. A few days passed. Then came the formal email from Callista. "We're hosting a retirement dinner for Dad. HOA requires all tenants to attend, including new ownership. You'll need to be present." It wasn't an invitation. It was bait. I accepted. The evening of the dinner, I wore a blazer, nothing flashy, just clean, structured. I tied my hair back, clipped a badge with ISL Holdings on it to my lapel, and carried a slim clipboard. I didn't knock when I entered the community hall. I didn't need to. The room quieted the second I walked in. Valora didn't recognize me right away. Dorian glanced up, then looked back down. Callista paled. I took my seat at the end of the row, across from them, but never once looking their way. The HOA manager stood to speak. "Thank you all for coming. Before we begin the celebratory portion of the evening, we'd like to introduce the new owner of the building, who is present for any tenant questions." I stood. "My name is Isleen Harmon. I represent ISL Holdings, the managing company of the property. Lease terms have been updated across all units. Market rates apply to everyone equally. There will be no exceptions." "Thank you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. My eyes landed briefly on Valora. Then I sat. No one clapped. No one breathed. The rest of the dinner was a quiet horror show. Valora clutched her fork like it might shatter. Dorian pretended to read the program over and over. Callista smiled too much, too tightly. I didn't stay for dessert. As I walked out, I passed the photo display set up near the door. Family memories, school ribbons, black and white shots of our grandparents. My photo was missing, of course, but I noticed one space with a thumbtack and no frame. I stopped in front of it for just a moment. Not to mourn, just to note the vacancy. That night, as I settled into my apartment, I checked Facebook again. Valora had posted again. Some doors open both ways, but not all exits lead to mercy. The likes were fewer this time. A few comments. One person asked if she was okay. The post smelled of desperation, wrapped in poetry. I didn't comment. I didn't share. I just stared at it for a moment and whispered, "Let them talk. I own the room they whisper in." The truth has a strange rhythm. It starts as a whisper, just low enough to ignore, but it grows. And eventually, if you don't listen, it walks right up to your front door. It was a gray Tuesday late afternoon. The kind of day where the light feels heavy, like it's struggling to make it through the clouds. I was folding laundry when I heard the knock. Not a polite tap. Not urgent. Just hesitant. Like whoever was on the other side wasn't sure they should be there. I opened it, and there stood Amanda. Her presence was disarming. She looked smaller, somehow, her eyes tired, makeup barely hanging on like it had been brushed on over a restless night, or maybe even tears. Her hair was pulled back in that high-tension ponytail she always wore when trying to control something that wouldn't behave. "I'm not here to make peace," she said before I could speak. I have to ask you something, and I want the truth this time." I stepped back, motioned her in. She walked inside like someone entering a courtroom they never agreed to be summoned to. Careful, defensive, braced for judgment. She didn't sit, just opened her bag and pulled out a worn manila folder. She set it on the table between us like it was a shared burden. "It was in the HOA folder," she said, voice tight. "I found it while helping Mom sort through the renewal packet. She doesn't even know I kept this copy." She opened the folder herself. I hadn't moved. The first page was a printed PDF spreadsheet formatting, black ink on ivory. Cold, clinical. At the bottom right, Valora's signature stamped neatly in digital cursive. Above it, a budget breakdown labeled Projected Household Expenses, Year 29. She pointed to one line in particular, Eliza Dependent Expenses, $18,230. Amanda tapped her nail on my name. She listed you, she said quietly, like you were a subscription. Therapy, utilities, food. Like you were a recurring charge she forgot to cancel. I stared at the paper, then at Amanda, but said nothing. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been buried beneath years of denial. I always thought Mom exaggerated about you, she admitted, voice shaking. But I didn't think it was this cruel. I didn't think she was capable of reducing you to a number. The silence between us stretched long, held only by the hum of the ceiling fan. Like even it wasn't sure what to say. Amanda finally sat down. I should have known, she murmured, more to herself than to me. Back when she wouldn't let you give a speech at Dad's retirement dinner, or when she blamed you for the missed mortgage check when it was actually mine. I kept making excuses for her because it was easier than looking at what she really was doing. She pulled out another document. This one was a lease agreement. She slid it toward me. I leaned in. There it was, my name. In the section labeled Property Ownership Transfer, ISL Holdings, under the LLC's parent authorization. My name, clear as day, in the signature field. Dated. Signed. Sealed. Amanda blinked hard. You were the only one who never asked for credit, she whispered. That's how I should have known it was you. You never needed the spotlight, just a little space to be. I got up and poured 2 cups of tea. It was stale, borderline cold, but neither of us cared. We sat there, hands around mugs that didn't warm us much. No cheers, no apologies, just quiet. For once, no one interrupted. No one talked over me. We just listened. I don't expect you to forgive me, Amanda finally said. Her voice was flat but brittle, like a glass already cracked down the middle. I don't expect to forget, I said, stirring sugar into my tea. But I'm done setting fire to things just to prove I was cold. Amanda nodded. There was no grand emotional collapse, no hug, no promises. Just 2 sisters breathing in a space that finally had room for both of us. As she picked up her folder and made for the door, she hesitated. You were never the extra mouth, she said. She just didn't know how to handle more than one voice in the room. I walked her out. We didn't hug. We didn't exchange any well-talk soon. But I did give her something before she left. Next time, I said gently, knock with truth, not fear. When the door closed behind her, I stood for a long time. Then I went back to the table, reopened that first PDF, and highlighted my name. It was just black ink on a page. But that line, that expense label, they'd spent years trying to bury me under it. I opened another file on my computer, my draft will. It wasn't complete yet. But one clause had just become crystal clear. To be seen is not a favor granted by others. It is a right I reclaim quietly, permanently, and without apology. I didn't need revenge. I needed space to breathe, so I built it, inch by inch, in my own name. The letter arrived on a gray Wednesday morning. It wasn't stamped. No return address, no tracking code. Just a plain white envelope slipped carefully through the mail slot. Like whoever delivered it didn't want to be seen, but still needed to be heard. That told me everything. I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. Slanted cursive, almost too neat. She'd always taken pride in her penmanship, as if forming perfect letters somehow proved she was a good person. I unfolded it slowly. 3 lines written like a sigh. You never really said what you needed. Maybe we assumed too much. You could have spoken up sooner. That was it. No apology, no ownership, no reflection, really. Just a gentle push of blame dressed up like empathy. I read it once, then folded it back, sealed it in the envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer with old phone chargers and expired coupons. I didn't need to reread it. I'd memorized that pattern years ago. That kind of silence, the kind used like a scalpel, had always been her specialty. I didn't write back. Instead, I picked up the keys to my building, the ones with the red ribbon I tied on, just after closing, and walked the hallways like a woman who finally owned her air. On the 2nd floor, Mrs. Ellison was outside her apartment, crouched over a crate of soil and ceramic pots. "Lavender," she said, offering me one with soft petals and rich earth. "It helps things grow, and it keeps the bitterness away." I thanked her, carried it down to the lobby, and placed it near the window, where the light could touch it in the afternoons. Then I climbed the stairs back to my apartment, each step an act of returning to myself. A few days later, I walked to the community center for a local event, Legacy of Our Neighborhood. I hadn't planned to go, but something about the word legacy made me curious. Who exactly did they think helped build this neighborhood? Who did they still pretend never existed? Inside, photo collages lined the walls. Snapshots of old storefronts, parades, block parties, graduations, and baby showers. Generations framed in laughter and sepia tones. And then, there it was, tucked in the lower left of a family collage. A photo from over 2 decades ago. My parents stood at the front porch of our old house, looking young and sure of themselves. Between them stood a little girl with crooked bangs and untied shoes. You could barely see her, half her body cut off at the frame's edge. No label, no name. I looked at it for a long time, not with pain, with recognition. They'd always edited me out, even in the photos they displayed. I wasn't part of their picture. Not really. I left without saying anything. Didn't need to. That night, I went home, opened the bottom drawer of my dresser, and found the only childhood photo I had kept. Me, age 6. Knees scraped, holding a garden hose in my lap like it was a trophy. I stared at it, thinking about the little girl I used to be with, one who tried so hard to be enough for people who only saw her when she was useful. Then I walked into the kitchen, lit the small incense bowl I kept beside the window, and gently placed the photo inside. It curled, blackened, and disappeared into smoke. Not out of anger, out of peace. I wasn't her anymore. Not the little girl waiting to be invited. Not the young woman holding her breath, hoping the next family dinner wouldn't hurt as much as the last. I finalized my will the next morning. Half of everything I had savings, stocks, my condo would go to a fund for women leaving controlling or emotionally abusive homes. I named it after my mother's maiden name, because sometimes irony is the sweetest form of clarity. On the last page, under Purpose Statement, I wrote, "For the ones they called extra." Later that evening, I recorded a short message for the scholarship archive I'd helped fund over the years. No makeup. Just me, sitting at my desk, speaking with the kind of calm that only comes after surviving silence. They edited me out of their story, so I wrote my own. If you're watching this, maybe you need to do the same. I didn't cry, I didn't smile. Just closed the laptop and let the moment settle. That weekend, I passed the old house again. The windows were lit from inside. Laughter from the backyard. Children's voices. Maybe theirs. Maybe someone else's. I didn't slow down. Just walked past. Breezed by like the ghost they once made me feel like. Then I whispered to the wind, "I forgive you. Not for them. For me." Because healing isn't about getting even. It's about walking away and not looking back. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one building the foundation beneath everyone else's feet. You can be erased from a photo, cut out of a family story, even written off on paper, and still write yourself back in. With your own pen, in your own words. I used to believe forgiveness had to be earned with apologies. But I've come to understand. Forgiveness is something you give yourself when you're ready to stop carrying the weight of people who never truly lifted you. Now I'd like to ask you, have you ever been made to feel like the extra mouth, the one who didn't belong? What did you do with that pain? Did you fight back? Did you grow from it? Or are you still carrying it quietly? If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear where you're watching from. Drop a 1 in the comments if it touched something real inside you. Or tell me your city. Let's make this a space for voices that were once silenced. And if this video didn't connect with you, I respect that too. Let me know why and where you're tuning in from. I believe in learning through listening. If you'd like to hear more true stories like this, about quiet strength, resilience, and reclaiming your place in the world, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. You never know when the next story might feel a little like your own.